But the fucking, what's the term? What's a gang term for this? Like a mafia term? The jig is up. I don't know. The federal government is not only coming after Donald Trump, but also the gabagoo is on the counter. Okay? They're also coming after Donald Trump's organization for tax fraud over the course of many years. Up to $2 million of fraud, as a matter of fact. Donald Trump's CFO pled guilty today. Let's take a look at what happened.
Big development now in another high-profile case we're following involving the former president. This one involves the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and Alan Weisselberg, the former longtime chief financial officer of the former president's namesake company. He is expected to plead guilty tomorrow to a 15-year tax fraud scheme. That's according to a source familiar with the matter. Now, the terms of the deal, they are still being finalized. Weisselberg may end up testifying against the company. That's despite the fact that he's not entered into a cooperation agreement with prosecutors. I'm joined now by CNN's Kara Scannell, who's been following it. What exactly is he pleading guilty to, and what does that mean that he's not entering into a cooperating agreement?
Right. So Alan Weisselberg was indicted last year along with the Trump Organization, and it was in a 15-count indictment going back 15 years that he was involved in this off-the-books compensation scheme, basically not paying taxes on some corporate benefits he got, like a company apartment, car leases, and
so the Trump Organization would pay his car lease, would pay school tuition for his grandkids or things like that?
Exactly. And then he wasn't paying income tax on that. So he's going to admit to all of this tomorrow, according to sources. He will plead guilty to the entire indictment, and he's agreed to testify at trial. The Trump Organization, the corporate entity, no individual, is going to trial in October on these charges. Now, they have had testimony from other people. They've had an accountant who has worked with the Trump Organization, who has testified before the grand jury, but this will be a live witness. It will be Alan Weisselberg, the longtime CFO. He's been with the company for 40 years, going to testify against the company if it gets to trial.
Is it just testifying in this particular scheme against the company, or the company and other things they may have been involved with?
Well, that's the thing here. This is just for his testimony in the tax fraud trial. You know, remember, he got charged with this because prosecutors were trying to put pressure on him to cooperate in their much broader investigation into the Trump Organization's finance and whether they misled lenders and insurers. But Weisselberg was not willing to cooperate with that investigation. So they was indicted a year ago, July. He's on the cusp of the trial in October. He just lost some motions to dismiss the indictment. He's now come to terms and said he's going to cooperate with this investigation. And for him, he gets some certainty here because according to this deal, he would serve 5 months in prison with time off for good behavior. We're looking at 100 days. But these days would be served in Rikers Island, the notorious New York City jail. But he gets the benefit of not having to go to trial, to potentially get convicted, to face anywhere from 1 to 3 years in prison to as much as 15 years in a New York State prison. So that's kind of the calculus for him. He gets some certainty. He knows he will serve a limited prison term, and he will offer this cooperation.
And what's next for the criminal investigation in New York? Is that still ongoing?
Well, it's still ongoing, but as you probably remember, the previous District Attorney Cy Vance had authorized his prosecutors to move forward with an indictment or to seek an indictment before the grand jury against the former president. The new District Attorney Alvin Bragg came in, reviewed the evidence, and said he didn't think there was enough there. One of the issues is they didn't have a cooperator. They didn't have someone like Weisselberg who was willing to tell the story behind the numbers. That investigation has slowed down. Sources tell me it's still ongoing, but there remains a lot of questions of what could they get that would satisfy the new DA that they have enough to bring an indictment when they didn't after already more than 3 years of investigating?
Kara Scannell, I appreciate it. Thanks. Joining me now to talk about it, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams. Why would they do a plea agreement with this guy if he wasn't going to cooperate in any criminal trial?
Now, believe it or not, Anderson, going to trial is really just a matter of resources and costs and benefits that prosecutors have to think through. And does it make more sense to go to trial and run the risk of losing and spend the resources of your time, your energy, your prosecutors, or guarantee that you get a conviction and someone going to jail? It sounds sort of odd to the
But it sounds like prosecutors kind of blinked. They decided, well, we'd rather get the conviction than to
nothing,
trial.
and lose, and maybe lose, because so much of what would have been on trial here is subjective. Now, some of it, there would be financial statements and records and so on. But this question, this is what Kara was talking about a little bit earlier, when we're talking about compensation or tuition being paid.
Plea bargains are the backbone of the American court system for the reasons that he just adequately explained. What is it, like 90% or something? Yeah, remember when I interviewed Trump's other lawyer, Michael Cohen? 97%, 99.7%? That's how it works.
Paid, there's a question of, well, maybe this might have actually been part of his compensation package, and a jury could have been tricked by that, or at least been confused enough by it to not get a conviction.
Rudy Giuliani testified before a grand jury in Georgia. The fact that he is a target, has been informed he's a target of this investigation. How does that influence his testimony?
So here's the thing. So many people think they can just...
Wait, you guys don't remember? I did. I interviewed Michael Cohen. Yeah, or rather, funnier than that, Michael Cohen interviewed me on his podcast from his house arrest. He has a house arrest podcast, and he interviewed me on his house arrest podcast.
Talk their way out of testimony, and maybe, and we know, we've seen Rudy Giuliani publicly, maybe he thought he might have been able to save him.
Most un-American thing that you can do. Same with these anti-protest bills. It completely goes against the First Amendment. It is the most un-American thing that you can push for, and it's going to be very damaging. A lot of Republicans were doing this before Donald Trump and pulled these anti-protest bills where you can drive into protesters with your car, and that would make it legal to do things like that. After the terrorist attack in Charlottesville, after the Unite the Right rally. Same with these anti-protest bills. It completely goes against the First Amendment.
Yeah, I did that shit. Bro, I've been around the fucking block. Okay? All you young ones have no idea. You're like, you're new fans. You don't even know. I've done debates. I've done interviews with so many motherfuckers.
By talking. If his lawyers were smart, they probably advised him to just keep his mouth shut because of the tremendous risk of jeopardizing his own rights if he does ultimately get charged with a crime.
So he could have just pled the fifth during this?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, and oddly enough, that can take 5 or 6 hours, because every question other than, what's your name, Rudy Giuliani? Like, so for instance, how long have you served as Donald Trump's lawyer? I plead the fifth, because that could come up in a conspiracy trial. Every possible fact. And so hour after hour, they were probably going through every question.
Can't they just do a blanket, I plead the fifth?
I mean, they could, but prosecutors have a tremendous amount of information. They want to get him on the record, at least pleading the fifth. But again, it seems...
Honestly, though, a lot of you in here right now, 4 years, 5 years down the line, when Andrew Tate is the president of the United States of America, will probably look back and go, remember when you debated the president of the United States of America? Squashed the beef with Logan Paul and Jake Paul and ran on a Tate Paul ticket? Yeah. How crazy is that? And now he's the president. Remember, we used to make the Bugatti jokes.
Odd, but and it can take an entire day of doing that, and we saw that with the president quite recently.
There is a federal hearing tomorrow.
Yeah, 5 years later, and women are made illegal. Yeah. Andrew Tate becomes president. First order of business, executive order. Women are illegal. Boys only.
Tomorrow in Florida regarding the unsealing of the affidavit that was used to get the search warrant in Mar-a-Lago, which point out CNN and other news organizations have been pushing to try to get it actually released. The Justice Department obviously does not want it released. What's the likelihood that it would get released?
I would say highly, highly, highly unlikely that it ever gets released, because of the fact that, number one, you want to protect the the rights of innocent people who are named in it. Number two, you want to protect your evidence. Number three, you want to protect your agents and the work that they're doing. Usually courts defer to the Justice Department or prosecutors when they say, we will jeopardize our case or our investigation here if this becomes public.
And the Department of Justice had already said that. They've already said, look, this is going to deter any witnesses.
So the judge would have to supersede that in effect and say, you know what, Justice Department, you don't know what's best for your own cases, and the fact that there are innocent people here. You know what? There's enough public interest here. Let's make it public.
Could the judge rule that they would redact, any agents' names, any witness names?
Okay. If they redact this document, Anderson, it's basically going to be a search on whatever date, August 5th or whatever, black box for 5 pages, 20 pages.
Elliot Williams, appreciate it.
Thanks, Anderson.